We all know what means getting high. As a matter of fact, that was a word that was taboo back in the 60s when the Doors sang that. Some radio stations chose to pull the song. I think one of the Ed Sullivan shows, I think that they banned the Beatles from singing words that were similar to that. Maybe it was a different expression, I don't remember. Regardless, it became part of the vernacular of our culture. And it's always usually associated with drugs or other forms of foreign substances that would help people get to a higher state of consciousness, or just getting high as in escaping their realities. I mean, there are different ways to describe it. Obviously, I here am going to discuss it from a very different perspective. But it's important to know that human beings from the beginning of time have always been seeking to look for ways to find how they can experience a deeper transcendent experience. And when they could not do so naturally, they turned to substances, whether it was natural, whether it was mushrooms or whether it was other type of chemicals, or later synthetic stuff. They turned to it because the human being clearly is hungry and thirsty for some higher experience. And one way or another, people seek it out. Now, for some it's through sexuality, for other people it's other means. There are many ways that human beings use, and I like the word transcendence because really it's about the counterforce to what we would call survival. We all have an aspect of our lives that is about survival, which is basically eating, drinking, breathing, shelter, social connections. And then there is the transcendent part of ourselves where we are not satisfied with the monotony of the routine, with our fixed patterns and our fixed habits. We look for something, we seek some way to go beyond that. Another word for it is transcendence. And the challenge is not just finding transcendence, but can you integrate that with your so-called daily routines? Because we can't escape the reality that we are bound by many of the gravitational forces, and I don't just mean that in a scientific way, in a physical way, but by the forces of survival that keep us alive. So many of us compartmentalize. So I want to introduce you to something really fascinating. It's a mystical concept based on actually a verse in one of the most cryptic prophecies, the Book of Ezekiel, that talks about a vision that he had. And there's an expression there that I believe, if you get to know it and you get to internalize it, it actually carries the secret to getting high while also being healthy, a healthy, natural form of getting high, while also balancing it with the other part of ourselves, which is being grounded in this world. Because what you ultimately see, and I've met many people who've experienced very deep levels of highs, whether it was through LSD or other forms of psychedelics, and they all say that though it opened our eyes to certain things, it was extremely dangerous. Some of my friends, people have told me, OD'd, and it was or even if they didn't, they burned themselves out and they could not return to regular life, day-to-day life. So which tells you something, that is it something that you can really integrate into our regular life? On the other hand, if you're really in need of the high, how do you balance the two? I was always intrigued by the Jimi Hendrixes, by Janis Joplin, by Jim Morrison, and by others, Miles Davis, who ended up being alive and not dying from an overdose. But the fact that they were such brilliant geniuses in their worlds, and they kept on going higher and higher and higher. They could not internalize it, integrate it into their lives, till the point they burned out, literally. Intrigued because the drive is a very powerful drive in the human being, and especially someone who's extremely creative, has a lot of energy going on. So a person like that is always looking and seeking to reach greater heights. But then at the same time, how do you internalize it? How do you balance it with a regular in a harmonic life that you can also live with your feet on the ground and not just with your heads in the clouds? So what I'm going to introduce you is two words in the Book of Ezekiel. And he says the following. He says that it's a vision of his. It's a mystical vision. He talks about a chariot. He talks about different forces at work. He actually uses a word that became the Hebrew for electricity. So he says, I see the energy, and the energy is running to and fro In the Hebrew, rotzai and shuv, to and fro. So if you think about it, look at energy, you always see the symbol of energy is like a lightning bolt. A lightning bolt is always that jagged lightning bolt. It's the positive and the negative. That energy is generated by a sense of the tension that's created by the two poles, by the two polar opposites, a positive and negative energy. When they strike, they turn into something that is more powerful. Think of it in the sense like a pump. For a pump to really deliver, think of the heart. It needs to contract and expand. If it only did one, you wouldn't generate that type of power and energy. So he says, I see the energy running to and fro. Another way of putting it is yearning and returning. And yet another way is tension and resolution. Tension and resolution. Now, I remember speaking to one of my students. He was a cardiologist. He used to come to my classes very often. We still keep in touch online now. And he had a difficult life, a very difficult life in personal matters with his spouse, with his children. Sweetest guy. And one day he says to me, Rabbi Jacobson, maybe you can say a blessing for me and give me some hope. Just one day of respite, one day of calm. My life is so full of chaos and tension and anxiety. So, just to lighten up the mood, I said to him, you mean like you want to have like a flat line? Now, being a cardiologist, you don't have to be a cardiologist to know that a flat line ain't good. A flat line means that the heart has stopped beating. If you look at a cardiogram of a healthy heart, what do you see? You see a wave. A wave. You see the peaks and the valleys, and that's a healthy heart. If the peaks are too high or the valleys are too low and they're not balanced, if they're irregular, that's a problem. A flat line is when it stops moving. So mobility, the very definition of life, is movement. Movement is a pattern of peak and valley, or in other words, tension and resolution. The rotzei and shuv. That's the healthy life. That you need to aspire to something, then you need to internalize it. If the aspiration is very great, but you can't find ways to resolve that tension, that creates deep anxiety. On the other hand, if you only have resolution and you don't have that seeking, that angst, that yearning, that pining for something more, you're missing out on the most important thing of life, which is aspiration, a dream. So that's the key to the balance, is to have your rotzei v'shuv in equal proportion. It's critical to always have something to look up to look forward to. But you don't want it to be so far that you cannot experience it, because then the tension becomes too much for us. Angst turns into anxiety. So it's a delicate balance, a dance, you can say, a dance which really actually interestingly reflects even the pulsating energy of subatomic particles. Quantum mechanics talks about the energy that's constantly pulsating. We don't sense it, but there are ways to measure it. There are ways to see its effects on us. So all of existence is really a pulse. A pulse. A pulse is, just feel your pulse, you'll see. It's a contraction and expansion. Exhale and inhale, as in breath. And interesting, the word for breath in Hebrew is the same word for soul. Neshama, neshima. Because a soul is compared to a flame. A flame is the best approximation, the thing that if you can physically try to visualize what a soul is like, what your soul, what my soul is like, a flame. What's unique about a flame? It's never at rest. It's always restless. It's flickering. The wick seems to be grounding it, but it's always licking the air, always licking upward. I share a story that I often tell. I write about it in the book, Toward a Meaning for Life, first chapter, Body and Soul. That there was a great mystic and a Rebbe, a great sage. His name was the Tzemach Tzedek. As a child, he was playing with other children on a ladder. And children were, playing on a ladder. Some of the children climbed up a bit, some a little higher, but he was the only one that had the courage to climb to the top. Now his grandfather, the great Rabbi Shneir Zalman of the Adi, known as the Alter Rebbe, was watching. So afterwards he says to his grandson, his little grandson, he says, why is it that you had the courage to climb all the way up to the top of the ladder and the others didn't? And the little boy answered, He said, because when they were climbing, my friends, when they were climbing the ladder, they kept looking down. They saw how high they were. They got scared. So they scrambled down, scampered down. When I was climbing the ladder, I kept looking up. I saw how low I was. So it motivated me. I wanted to go higher. Simple response, but think about it. In our lives, very often, we're looking down. You're around people that have accomplished less than you, then it's not really a motivation. You then feel, I feel pretty good about myself. But when you look up, you aspire, you dream, you imagine, you dare to imagine new possibilities, what happens? It leads you upward. That's why flame is so critical here. We all must have that. The idea of having the dream of having animal bliss, and I don't need to aspire to anything. I know some people dream of that. That's because their anxiety and the tension of life can be so overpowering. So they just want to just let me just be. But that's not really natural. A human being can't just be. A human being is a flickering flame, and thank God for that. That's what makes us alive. But many of us say, you know what, I'm biologically alive. I'm breathing, but I'm a zombie. I don't feel, I've given up. I'm resigned. So much hasn't worked in my life. My dreams have been shattered. My hopes have been disappointment after disappointment. So I want you to know, no, your soul is always alive in you, just like your heart is beating. And it seeks, but it needs resolution as well. Remember the heartbeat, the cardiogram. It's exactly how it is also on a spiritual, psychological, and emotional level. So when you talk about getting high, what does it really mean? It means seeking, but knowing how to ignite that from within. As soon as you rely on a foreign substance, or anything that's not coming from internally, you immediately are creating an unnatural state. Can it create a superficial or a temporary high? Yes, it can. But you haven't earned it. And therefore, you will not be able to internalize it. What I'm talking about is feeding the transcendent voice of your own soul. And how do you do that? By seeking out activities that actually nourish that part of you. And that could be here in the area of music, in the area of art, it could be in the area of romance, in the area of love. So many different ways. But you need to know you have that going on right now inside of you. And it needs, just like the body needs nourishment, so does the soul. So you need to be involved in a transcendent activity. We're coming to the Festival of Lights, Hanukkah. And it's really a universal message for all. It's a festival of lighting flames. But really, what is the message? The message is the flame within you. To light, to ignite the transcendent voice inside of you. And sometimes, yes, we need to go back to our younger years and not allow the jaded part of our personalities and our experiences to bring us down. But at the same time, it needs to be grounded. So it's like climbing a ladder. You do one step at a time, one rung at a time. You move one foot up the high upper rung, but your other foot is still down in the lower rung. And then you move that. You don't jump more steps than you can. And that's the way we keep the balance going. Is it easy? Not always easy. That's why we need friends. We need mentors. We need some checks and balances. Because sometimes the temptation, when you taste transcendence, is so powerful, you just want more of it. And you don't have the discipline and the restraint and the discretion. It's like knowing when to stop and let that high, so-called, be reabsorbed within your being. And those are the two words that the prophet Ezekiel uses. Tension and resolution. The tension of healthy restlessness. Not the unhealthy tension of anxiety and fear and insecurity and being afraid of others judging you and all those other forces that really debilitate and demoralize us. I'm talking about a restlessness that motivates, that helps us grow. And that's how you light your fire. Yes, you light your fire. You light your inner fire that's already there, but sometimes is concealed, undercover. And as I said, there are many ways to do so. What you need to seek out are the things that make you excited. What are you passionate about? And I'm talking about healthy things, obviously. And then exercising those muscles. We all have different things that we are really excited about that is a form of transcendence. So you act on it. Make it a discipline, a regimen each day, each week. Find a partner, someone that enjoys the same interest as you do. And there are many ways to do it, but it has to be deliberate. It doesn't just come automatically. And then, when you sense that there's that sense of satisfaction, or more than satisfaction, you really feel inspired, always make sure that the rest of you is going along with it. It's not an escape from your reality. You internalize it back. That is why it's vital that things be translated into action. I'll just speak for myself. In my seeking transcendence, it can become a very selfish act. It's about me transcending. But for myself, the grounding is when I interact with others. I'm speaking with you right now. Listening. Cross-pollinating. What does that do? That doesn't allow the fire just to escape and just go upward. It grounds it, that you have to deal with other people. You have to deal with family members. And you're not just escaping the reality, you're bringing that transcendence back into your life. Now, is it easy? No. It's a real difficult dance, because transcendence, by definition, is getting out of the doldrums, of the vicissitudes, of monotonous routines. But the key transcendence is when you discover that you transcend transcendence, and you realize, you know what, let me bring that transcendence back to a very basic meal. Even you're eating breakfast or lunch or dinner, you'd say, one second, there's nothing transcendent about it. Yes, there is. The mystics explain that the meal, the food that you eat, the drink you drink, is filled with sparks. Just like there are those subatomic pulsating particles, everything has sparks, potential. So when you eat the meal with good intentions, with using the energy for doing something good, you are actually elevating even the mundane, even the monotony, the boring routines, you're making them also transcendent. And that's the secret to the Ratzeh V'Shuv dance, that it's not just going upward the flame, it's also coming downward, it's grounded. And at the same time, does not lose its restlessness. That's the challenge, to make sure that it's not too the peaks aren't too high and the valleys aren't too low, but like the cardiogram, the pattern of the heart's journey. That should be our journey. So, my friends, there's much to think about, much to do. You can reach great heights. And it's important to have, as I said, grounding elements that can help keep it in certain parameters, commitments, responsibilities. Often transcendent people can be free spirits, but you know what? They're not around. You can't rely on them. They're always flying, floating, as they say. Their hat is always somewhere else. The key of the ultimate transcendence is those that have that type of selflessness, where they don't get caught up in their own transcendence, which then becomes just another indulgence, but they don't learn that it's also part of being service to others, that transcendence is actually a force that elevates and unites us all. So, ignite your sparks, get high in the healthy, natural way, and bring it back to your own personal life and the life of your loved ones. Everyone, have a very good celebration of the lights, above all of your inner light, and please share, comment, like, give me your feedback. I'd love to hear from you. And let's together find ways to introduce our unique energy and spirit into things, and at the same time, internalizing it all. Be blessed. Have a very good week. See you again. Please check us out at meaningfullife.com for a full array of programs, scheduled literally on a daily basis, being updated. And if anything you think we should talk about or share, discuss, we're always open to hearing that. So don't be bashful. Everyone be well and be blessed. Thank you.